Welcome to the Christ-centered Cosmic Civilization. I'm just back from Mission Life Grace, the Gathering Summer Camp, amazing time there. And there I once again met Julie, who's surely one of the most passionate fans of the podcast, so that was great. And other people I met who were loving the podcast, as weird and wonderful as it is. Well, we're continuing on with this examination of politics, really, and we want to start into part 2 of the book, the argument. And we want to now think about the throne in the heavens, because before we can argue about anything else, we have to look up. The reason most modern political conversations go nowhere is that they begin with the wrong question. They begin with who should rule and search for the answer in a series of human options like kings, parliaments, councils, governments, mobs, parties, presidents, hunters, whatever, populists, elitists, whatever. But they're all looking sideways for an answer. But the Bible looks upward. The biblical vision begins with the throne. And from the throne, it looks down. It says that there's already a king, a divine king, installed by God the Father, and that he is on the throne now, and that everything else, every parliament and palace and polling booth, is downstream of him. Now, the Christian who has not seen this cannot really understand any of it. And the Christian who has seen this cannot really see anything else. So the next thing for us to do is, we're not going to argue about democracy or sacral monarchy yet. What we're going to do is just look at Jesus. We're going to look at his throne, at the descending order of his authority, at the Trinitarian source of all order, at the staggering and almost embarrassing focus the Bible gives to monarchs, and at the moment when the divine emperor himself stood before a Roman governor and explained where political authority actually comes from. So this is, in a way, chapter 5 of the big argument, and it's just this: the divine emperor, Jesus, is the Lord. So let me ask you a question that ought to be the first political question of every Christian's life, and which somehow almost never is. And the question is simple: who is actually running the world right now? Not metaphorically, not at the end of history when Christ will return and put all things right. I mean, right now, as you read this or listen to this, as the news sources scroll, as the markets open, as the bombs fall and the babies are born, who's in charge? Who do you really think's in charge? And not just what's the right answer. In practice, the way you go about behaving or trying to change the world or whatever it is you're doing, who do you actually think is in charge? Because the answer the modern world gives is, in a way, broadly, no one. Because the idea is history is a process, the market is mechanism, power is whatever is left after the negotiations, after the deals are done. There is no one really at the top. And that, our age tells us, is the great achievement. We've grown out of the childishness of believing in a monarch or a single king or an emperor or anything like that. We now have a different view of power. So, but the answer the Bible gives is the opposite, and it is given so often in such varied and overwhelming language that it's genuinely difficult to understand how the modern Christian has managed to miss this. And I want to just say that like modern Christian political thinking, broad stream of the mainstream, is really ignorant of the Bible. And just recently, I was talking to someone who'd written a book about this subject. And for them, what they were doing is they'd already decided that democracy is the answer and we need to elect, as Christians we're called to participate in democracies and we should use that responsibly to try and, vote for people who have some policies that seem better. And then what they did was they took that to the Bible to try and find in the Bible anything that could in any way be compatible with it, sort of. But if we just read the Bible as is and forget whether it's compatible with our modern world in any way, because it may well not be, in the Bible, the world is run by a man. He sits on a throne in the highest heaven. Think of just Psalm 2. Just read Psalm 2 and see what political power, what political theology is in Psalm 2. That's just a very, very quick, simple example. But there are literally, I've got about 100 of them listed. But Psalm 2 is a super simple starting point. This is the whole world is run by the eternal Son of the eternal Father, and he has been given all authority in heaven and on earth, and his name is Jesus. So let's look at him. Actually, let's begin with Hebrews chapter 1. The opening verses are written by a Christian who cannot keep their eyes off Jesus, and they want us to do the same. Let me just read this. In these last days, God has spoken to us by his Son, whom he appointed heir of all things, and through whom also he made the universe. The Son is the radiance of God's glory and the exact representation of his being, sustaining all things by his powerful word. After he had provided purification for sins, he sat down at the right hand of the Majesty in heaven. So just notice the verbs. He is appointed heir of all things. He made the universe. He sustains all things. He sat down. The whole movement of the passage is from creation through the cross to throne. And the figure who carries every verb is the same, God the Son. It is Jesus. It's Jesus who sat down. The work of redemption is finished. There's no more sacrifice to offer. He has done it. He's finished it. And now he's taken the place of highest honor in the universe. And he is sustaining everything. Every atom, every galaxy, every stitch of your clothing, every breath in your lungs. He's doing that by his powerful word. So he's not waiting to take office. He is in office. And again, this is a hugely confused area of modern Western, perhaps Christian thinking. I meet many Christians who think that Jesus will become king at some point in the future, but that right now he is not reigning. They say one day Jesus will come to reign, and then they'll say things like, oh, he will reign for 1,000 years on earth or something, as if but he's not reigning now. But in the Bible, he is reigning. He is reigning. And in the Creed, it's been specified. In the Creed, we say his kingdom will have no end. It's not future, and it will not ever be of a limited duration. He reigns forever. So, and in the next chapter of Hebrews chapter 2, it all becomes clear why this matters for politics. And it's almost as if he's unaware of the political point that's being made in Hebrews 2. Let's just look at Hebrews 2, verses 8 to 9. It says, in putting everything under Jesus, God left nothing that is not subject to him. Yet at present we do not see everything subject to humanity, but we see Jesus. So everything has been put under Jesus. We don't see everything in submission to humanity in general, but the inventory of what he has been given includes all things. The kings of the earth are under him. The presidents are under him. The prime ministers under him. The committees and the courts and the corporations and the celebrities, every one of them is under Jesus. They may not know it. They may rage against it, as you'll have seen in Psalm 2 if you read that. But everything is subject to the Lord Jesus Christ. So when we are talking to Jesus, we are talking to somebody who is far more important, far more powerful, far more executive authority, far more military power than anybody we could ever meet. Now, I've seen how people behave when they think they're going to, when they're going to speak to a prime minister or a president earthly. People get very excited and they behave as if like it's an enormous privilege, and that they sometimes have even known people who will think this is a tremendous opportunity for me to speak to this person about something that they feel needs attention in the country. Whatever, if you think that's worthwhile. Esther, I guess, did that sort of thing. But do we think of Jesus that way? Do we talk to him like with this tremendous confidence that we're finally getting through to somebody who has real power, who can really change things? Because when I hear the way people pray to Jesus, in the main, I don't really hear that energy. This podcast and all my work depends entirely on donations. It's only through your support that all this research and teaching can be free for so many. If you're in a position to help, please consider supporting the mission by giving to the Biblical Frameworks charity. Find out how at biblicalframeworks.com and look for the Give link. Thank you. Look at Colossians chapter 1. We often go to that on this podcast, but let's look at it again. Paul writes about Jesus there, and again, think of it as unmistakably political language. Jesus is the image, going from verse 15, Jesus is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn, the inheritor of all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. So again, allow that list to just sit in your meditation. Thrones, powers, rulers, authorities, governments, prime ministers, presidents, earthly and in the heavenly realms also. Paul, he's not just writing about angels. Sometimes people read that and say, it's just talking about his power over angels and demons and things. Well, it certainly does include them. But just anyone who reads that without being switched to an over-spiritualized way of reading it, the first thing that will impact them is that Paul is writing about political power and spiritual power, perhaps. But most people's first impression is that he's speaking about Jesus has power over all earthly powers and governments. Every one of them was created for Jesus. He is the telos, the goal, the reason. So Caesar's throne, Pilate's bench of judgment, and Pharaoh's chariot, and Babylon's tower, or Westminster's mace. There's that mace, isn't there, that represents the power of the Palace of Westminster in the UK, or Washington's Oval Office, or all of or the Kremlin, or all these different symbolic seats of power. Every seat of power you can name was created for Jesus to use in his divine empire. They are his. They were always his. Some of these powers know that they belong to him, or once knew that. Many of them don't and have never thought that. Let's look at another one. Philippians chapter 2, Jesus' hymn of self-emptying. It says, Jesus humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord. So, and again, every knee, every tongue, there's no constituency that is exempt, no area of earthly power that is beyond his reach or not worthy of his attention. There's no, and there's no electorate that's voted on this. Like nobody put him into this place. And the hymn is not aspirational. It's not Jesus hopes to be in this position of total cosmic universal power. It's announcing what already is. God has exalted him. Past tense. It's happened. The throne is occupied. And then Matthew 28, right at the end, the very last words of the gospel before Jesus ascends to this throne, he just says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Just let's take out the heaven bit just for the sake of this for a second. Jesus, as just the last thing he says while his feet are on this planet, he says, all authority on earth is mine. All earthly authority is mine. And then he says, therefore, go. And that connecting word, therefore, hugely important. So that go and make disciples and baptize and teach everybody how to obey everything Jesus has commanded. All of that, the great work of evangelism and church building and everything, is based on this simple statement that Jesus says, all authority on earth is mine. So we go grounded entirely on the existing rule of Jesus, the one who is the holder of all authority on earth. So the mission, why that's important is our mission when we're doing evangelism, we are not attempting to make Jesus king. Sometimes I've heard that said where people have said, we want to go and do some evangelism to make Jesus king of this area. Or sometimes even in recent political discourse, there's this idea that let us make Jesus king of this nation or something. No, the mission we do of evangelism, of announcing his good news and inviting people into his kingdom, it's not the attempt to make him king. He is king. The mission is the announcement of his rule and the calling of the nations to bow. Where it's sort of really, when we're doing evangelism, we are inviting people to surrender. They are in rebellion, and we're inviting them to surrender to the great king who has authority over all things. So look at Acts 2, Peter's first sermon there. The first message preached by Peter on that day was a political message. He says this: God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Christ. The crowd was cut to the heart. They didn't ask, what shall we believe? They asked, what shall we do? Because they knew what was true. So what should they do in response to this truth? So in a way, we could say that the first sermon preached in the global expansion of church was a sermon about the political power of Jesus. And the first response of the converts was the question every subject asks of a monarch. The question they ask is, what do you want me to do? Like, in effect, here I am your servant, send me, command me. I am yours to command. That's, what should I do? Open the book of Revelation. The whole book's one long, intoxicating, sometimes terrifying meditation on the divine throne of Jesus. The Father is seated on the throne, and Jesus shares that throne with him. He is authorized by the Father. Well, look, Revelation 4, verse 2. I saw a throne in heaven with someone sitting on it. And then in chapter 5, verse 6, I saw a lamb looking as if it had been slain, standing in the center of the throne. Then chapter 19, verse 16, on his robe and on his thigh, he has this name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. So behind all the apparent confusion and chaos of this passing age, the living God rules through Jesus, the Lamb and Lion of God. From Hebrews to Revelation, the apostolic witness is the same again and again, almost with mounting volume until we get to Revelation. Jesus is the Lord. Jesus is the King of Kings. Jesus has authority over every earthly power. He is enthroned. He is reigning. Every other power that exists under him. Now, okay, so what does that mean for the political life of us? What does this mean for the political life of the Christian? It means, first of all, that Jesus is not, quote, Lord of our hearts, in the cramped little modern sense, where he gets the inner room of our private spirituality, and the wider world is someone else's territory. That's hugely important to stop and meditate on that. We often say, I'm inviting Jesus to be Lord of my life. Well, he is Lord of everybody's lives. He is Lord over all authorities and powers and thrones and corporations and everything. He is Lord. You can acknowledge his lordship and submit to the divine emperor, but you cannot make him Lord of your life. He is that. Whether you acknowledge that and submit to that, that's the question. And the idea that it's only an inner thing, he is Lord of my heart, it's an inward, private, personal, individual almost thing. No, all of that is part of this great delusion that the modern world, like in the modern world, Christianity has become, particularly in the Western world, but it's just this obedient lapdog, really, that just it's accepted a version of its teaching and message that is kind of this, Jesus is the Lord of my heart. It's my private thing. And so the secular atheist, the Enlightenment was the most horrific thing that's happened in Western history. This huge fundamental rejection of Christianity. And the whole of the modern world is about that rejection. And what the Enlightenment did, its first order of business, was to redefine Christianity in such a way that it would not be a threat. It would, to neutralize the actual challenge of Christianity, of the announcement of Jesus as Lord. And so what the Enlightenment did is create a version of Christianity that is inward, personal, subjective, Lord of my heart, all of that nonsense. It's a totally pagan religion. It's got nothing to do with Christianity. But that is the first thing we've got to eject from ourselves, the notion that somehow the lordship of Jesus is an inner thing, a subjective thing, a private thing. Jesus is not a domestic God, like a household God. Christ is the Lord of this house, sometimes we say, and we mean that well, and could even mean it seriously. But in the main, it's almost saying, here at least he has authority. No, he has authority over every house, whether it's acknowledged or not. He's not a domestic God. He is not the patron saint of a hobby called Christianity or called religion. He is the divine emperor, and the actual political reality of every nation is his reign. He is the most important political figure in every nation. Some acknowledge that, some deny that and actively reject it, and then there's a few that embrace that. But that's the fact. He is the most important actual political reality of every nation. So the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, the President of the United States, the Prime Minister of India, the Chancellor of Germany, whatever, they're all going about their work as servants of Jesus. And to change our minds to really believe that is like, that's the revolution, to do that. Because once you really believe that, you start directing your heart and mind differently to where real power belongs. And you stop wasting your time and attention and energy on underlings who have no real power. So all these political figures that we often focus on, they are all exercising borrowed authority that Christ the King delegated, and he can revoke at any moment. And in the UK, we're aware of how prime ministers come in with 10-year plans, and some of them have not even managed 10 weeks. See, none of them are their own bosses. They never were. The second big thing is that the Christian who is afraid of the next election shouldn't be, because they're suffering from a kind of spiritual confusion. Any election, no matter, they're all, of course, heralded to be the most important of our generation and yada, 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 whatever, nonsense. Because the truth is, no election will change who is on the throne. Who is on the throne, who is the real power behind all thrones, that one, who is on the throne, has been settled since before the foundation of the universe. The divine Lamb that was slain stands at the center of the supreme throne, and he's filled with the sevenfold Spirit. Revelation 5 verse 6. Polling stations close at... Well, actually, today, as I'm recording this, there is an election happening in this country, in a by-election, and the polling stations close at 10 in the evening. But the divine throne never closes at all. It's permanent. Older than the universe is this divine imperial rule. The third thing it means is that we have a king, and he hears us. So this isn't a remote bureaucratic deity. This is the same Jesus who wept at the tomb of Lazarus, who held out his arms to embrace the children, who washed Peter, the fisherman's feet. He said, "Come to me, anyone who is weary." He is the King we have. We have him. He's our King. How wonderful is it to know that because think about how all these underling powers use their power, how unapproachable they are, how limited they are with the best will in the world. Even if they intend to do good and to serve, they cannot serve. They can often not even get near to people because of danger. They're unable to protect themselves from the dangers of mixing in a crowd of ordinary people. But this king isn't like that. The real king, the real authority over all of them, the King of Kings. Think of how he behaved when he was among us like that, and how he still says, "Come to me if you are weary. Come and talk to me." He's the King we have. He's the King we can pray to. Look at Hebrews 4, verses 15 to 16. We do not have a high priest or a representative who is unable to empathize with our weaknesses, but we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet did not sin. Let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence. So the real seat of power is approachable. It's approachable because the one who sits on it is the same one who carried the cross for us. He's the one who's experienced our life in all its challenges and poverty and rejection and suffering. Now, I do want to just add a few further passages to this gallery biblical witness to the enthronement of Jesus, just to close it all off, because look, I can't really miss Daniel 7. It's the prophet Daniel sees the four great empires of the ancient world rising as beasts out of the sea, ravenous and proud, and each imagining that they had the power. But then it says, Daniel 7:13 to 14, the thrones were set in place, the Ancient of Days takes his seat, and one like a son of man comes with the clouds of heaven and approaches the Ancient of Days. He was given authority, glory, and sovereign power. All peoples, all nations, human beings of every language worshipped him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that will not pass away, and his kingdom is one that will never be destroyed. I mean, that figure is Jesus. That's not something that, what someone recently had said. People in the New Testament attribute Daniel 7, or apply Daniel 7 to Jesus, as if to say, well, Daniel 7 isn't really originally about Jesus, but they decided to apply that to him. And they might say, so you could say, I don't know, Henry IV Part 1, there's a character called Falstaff. And we might say, I was listening to a comedian today, and he's like Falstaff. It's as if Henry IV Part 1, I'm going to apply Henry IV Part 1 with the Falstaff character. I'm going to apply that to this person in our modern day. Well, you can do that. Of course you can, and portray them as a Falstaffian figure and everything. But we wouldn't. Obviously, Shakespeare wasn't thinking about a modern comedian in the 21st century. So sometimes people do that, and they'll say, well, Daniel in Daniel 7 has in mind whatever he's got in mind. He's not thinking about Jesus. But people in the New Testament decide, oh, that language from back then, that makes me think a bit like, I'm going to take that language and apply it to Jesus. No. That's absolute no. That's useless. That's not. That's just telling us something about a modern person who likes to see a connection between an ancient text and somebody else. What we need to know is, was Daniel thinking about Jesus? Was Daniel thinking about Jesus? Was it originally about Jesus? Because if it was, if there was a vision given of Jesus hundreds and hundreds of years before Jesus was born, and that literature was in fact intended to be about him, that is powerful. That is powerful. Well, Jesus does seem to think so. When he is standing in front of the ruling council in Mark 14:62, and he says, "You will see the Son of Man sitting at the right hand of the Mighty One and coming on the clouds of heaven." And this ruling council, they understood him perfectly, and that's why they tore their robes. They understood. They knew Jesus was saying, Daniel was writing about me. I am the Son of Man. And Daniel was writing about the Son of Man, so that's me. So the vision of Daniel 7, no, is not just a forecast of something that will happen at the end of the world. It's a description of present reality. Jesus came with the clouds into the throne room of his Father. He was given authority over every people and nation and language forever. When Daniel saw this vision, he was a captive in Babylon, watching pagan empires devour the world. The Son of Man showed him that the empires were under control, ruled by the kingdom of heaven. What the book of Daniel shows us is that all the empires and nations of the world are tools in the hands of the one who is to be enthroned. Look at Ephesians chapter 1. Paul is praying for the Ephesians that they would know the riches of the gospel. And he reaches for strong political language. Paul prays, this is Ephesians 1 from verse 19, that we would know, his incomparably great power for us who believe. That power is the same as the mighty strength he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms, far above all rule and authority, every power and dominion, and every title that can be given, not only in the present age, but also in the one to come. God placed all things under his feet and appointed him to be head over everything for the church. We got to read that list in a way over and over again. I'd urge you to just read Ephesians 1, 19 to 22, like 100 times this week. Because Paul has not picked his words carelessly. He says Jesus is far above every title that can be given. Meaning, we might have all sorts of titles like President, Premier, Chancellor, Prime Minister, Chairman, Director, General, Pope, Patriarch, Archbishop, Mayor, Head Teacher, Father, Mother, Master, Lord, whatever, CEO. There is no rank in any organization, civil or military or ecclesial or domestic, that is not under his feet. Any title that can be imagined is all completely under his authority. They're tools to be used by him. Again, just that Revelation 5, we've touched on it several times. And we'll end this chapter with just that vision again. There's the throne in the center of the heavenly room. There's a sealed scroll in the right hand of the one on the throne. No one is found worthy to open it. John weeps. A voice says, "Don't weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed." John looks up, expecting a lion, and he sees a lamb, looking as if it had been slain. And the lamb takes the scroll, and the entire heavenly court falls down in worship and says, Revelation 5:9-10, you are worthy to take the scroll and to open its seals, because you were slain, and with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation, and you have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth. So there it is. The Lamb on the throne is the one running the world, and he runs it, the song says, by the blood of his cross. The blood of his cross is the legitimacy of his reign. He's appointed. So he has kind of formal authority given to him from the Father, but there's this other kind of de facto authority. So de jure authority. By law he has it, but from his Father. But he has this de facto authority, the authority that he has won, and kind of a kind of persuasion authority, that it's obvious to everybody who understands that his authority is given a kind of legitimacy, or not because it's obviously legitimate from the Father's authority, but it has a kind of authenticity for everybody in the universe because of the cross. The most powerful person in the universe is the one who chose for our sake to let himself be killed. I suppose what I'm trying to say there is Jesus said that the one who wants to be the greatest must be the servant of all. And he implements that. The one who has the greatest power serves the most, and by doing so wins for himself a kind of reputation and honor and love and respect that makes him the greatest and the ruler of all, just in that way. Anyway, look, let's end with this question again. Who is actually running the world right now? The biblical answer, the Christian answer, is Jesus. He's the Lord. He's on the throne. The Father has given him the inheritance of the nations. The Spirit has been poured out as the seal of his reign. The kings of the earth, all the authorities on earth, even whatever title they go by, they are all under his control. The Lamb has stood up. The empires and kingdoms of the earth are under his control. The throne's occupied. It's not a future hope. It's a present reality. And the great political relief of the Christian life is the discovery we are not running anything. He is. He always was. He always will be.